Thank you. Good morning. I'm John McCune. I'm a very grateful, recovered alcoholic. I'm grateful to be in a meeting of AA. My emotions are like right there. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love alcoholics. Dear God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the people in AA, the big book, the steps, the message I deliver this morning, all spiritual things, and even you, dear God. I ask this so I may have a truly open mind and a new experience with these things. Please help me to see the truth. Amen. Now, before I start, I have a little public service announcement by way of the Lost and Found Department. Did anyone happen to drop a large roll of $100 bills wrapped in a rubber band? Oh, a few of you, I see. Good news, kids. I found the rubber band. It's right there. Pick it up when we're done. I'd like to thank the committee for including me in your 30th annual event here. It's always an honor and a privilege to stand before a group of alcoholics and share a little bit about my journey through AA. I'd also like to thank the volunteers that have worked long and hard hours to put this together. Now, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit. Over the last calendar year, I was asked on 2 separate occasions to chair the registration committee for 2 events for Area 58. My immediate answer was no. Now, I lay this before my sponsors, and they slap me up a little bit. I take it to prayer, and then I go back and I say, okay, I'll do it. Now, don't get me wrong, it was still black heel marks all the way to the keyboard to start doing it, but I said yes. And I realized in putting this together that when I say no to anything in life, that is self-will. That is not the grace of God. I'd like to thank the other speakers who have traveled great distances. Great message by Donna last night. Hooked up with Jane and James on Facebook a month or so ago and listened to some of her things online. And I understand how much courage it takes for you all to stand in front of the group. And I borrow from that courage. I need to see that. So thank you all. My sobriety date is March 24th of 1980. I was granted the gift of sobriety in Lansing, Michigan, where I spent the next 34 years. I have a set of disciplines that were drilled into me very, very early on. I ask for help in the morning. I give thanks at night. I attend meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I read the literature, and I call my sponsors. If I can keep doing those disciplines, those 5 simple things, then I got a shot at this deal. I learned after I moved here 2.5 years ago that I relapse one compromise at a time. And when that man said that, I got chills just now when I said it, because it still holds true. One morning of saying the pillow feels just too good, I don't have to go to that 7 a.m. meeting. I'd rather watch whatever the heck is on TV than go to that 10 a.m. donut meeting on Saturday in Brookings. But because my meetings are committed meetings, this is the way I was raised. John, you commit to the group, which means you are there every time they meet. So there is no argument. I don't even start. John, if you're not going to be there, you let someone in the group know where you are and why. John, we still have to pay the rent and buy the coffee. Your money better be in the basket whether you're there or not. So I offer that to any treasurers who are wringing their hands over diminishing funds in your account. Take that message back to the group. Financial support is paramount. Now, my sponsor trained me very, very well. And he said, when you get up and you do an open talk, John, please, don't talk about yourself for 48 minutes and then address AA for the last 12. If you do, I'll be in the back of the room with a high-powered rifle and I'll take you out. Now, I haven't seen him here today, but I'm not taking any chances. What I have done by way of qualification to indicate to y'all that I do belong standing here, that my heart is in this deal, I rewrote the doctor's opinion. I take this big book, and my set-aside prayer helps me do this. I take this big book and I read it first person. I put my name in these pages. I take statements and turn them into questions, and I ask myself, where am I on this particular deal? So the doctor's opinion in my book says John McCune drinks essentially because he likes the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while John admits it is injurious, John cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To John, his alcoholic life seems the only normal one. John is restless, irritable, discontented, unless John can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which John sees others taking with impunity. After John has succumbed to the desire again, as he often does, and the phenomena of craving develops, John passes through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless John can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of John's recovery. On the other hand, and strange as it may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same John who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. That is why I drank. That is how I drank. But most importantly, that is why if I stopped those very simple disciplines that you all taught me, that is why I will drink again. And frankly, I'm all done drinking. Oh, that's AA blasphemy. No, not really. It tells me in the book that we are people who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. The second to the last line in Dr. Bob's Nightmare says, "It will never fail." I found that to be true. On the other side of that same coin, if I compromise one at a time and get away from those simple disciplines, there's a drink in my future. Not looking forward to that. I love the theme of this weekend. Let me back up one quick second. On the qualification, the fact that I am the youngest of 5 children from a low-class Midwestern Catholic family, the fact that I never went to kindergarten, the fact that my oldest sister was a nun for 20-some years, The fact that my father sold televisions and then used cars. The fact that my mother stayed home and raised us and then joined the workforce later in life. The fact that when I set the volume on my television, it always has to be an even number. None of that has anything to do with my alcoholism. Thank you. Silky wrote all about me before I was born, right? And I love when we make that observation. This stuff was written before we were born. It's great. So back to the theme of the event, but for the grace of God. I looked up the word grace. My daughter's middle name is Grace. Hi, Sarah. It's defined as free and unmerited favor of God as manifested by the salvation of sinners and the bestowal of blessings. I could sit right now and we could all sit and think about that for an hour and be moved. Bestowal of blessings, free and unmerited. My goodness sakes, isn't that what I have found in Alcoholics Anonymous? So on the theme of the grace of God, I would like to tell you a handful of stories on how the grace of God has manifested itself in my life and in the lives of those around me. Let's talk about my first step experience. When I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous for what I call my last first meeting, I said, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And y'all weren't shy, you told me. Oddly enough, the list of things you wanted me to do paled in comparison to the list of the things you wanted me to stop doing. So I was trying to balance all that stuff. Now, I went to the noon beginner groups every day, and it seemed to me that Al Andrews was always the chairperson. Now, I'm sure that's not the case. My sponsor reminded me, your story, when you tell people, you should remind them that there's 3 parts to your story. What you think happened, what you're willing to tell people you think happened, and what really happened. But it seemed like Al Andrews was always the chairperson of the meeting. And Al would tell the same story all the time. He was sober 11 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not a problem in the world. Went to work one morning, city worker for the city of Lansing. He pulled a sewer cap. He looked down the hole and his dentures fell out and went down the sewer. He stood up, he walked across the street into a bar and got drunk, and he was drunk for 2 years. Drunk for 2 years. I'd go to Al after the meeting and say, Al, honest to God, stop telling that story. And he said, why? I said, because it scares the living bejeebies out of me. And he goes, oh, that's simple. The reason you're scared is because the first step is still in your head. You got to get it down to your heart. And that's the longest 18 inches in the world. I went home and measured, it's only 14. He was wrong. I have a great affinity for paying attention to the wrong information. But I said, Al, how do we do that? How do I get it from here down to here? And he goes, yeah, nobody knows. But I guarantee you, Johnny, if you don't drink and you go to meetings, you ask for help, you give thanks at night, you call your sponsors, you read the literature, I promise you, I will tell that story someday and you won't care. I sat in meeting after meeting after meeting. It could have been a handful of weeks, it might have been a couple months, I don't remember. But one day he wound up and lit into that story, and I waited for that punch in the gut. And it wasn't there. And I knew that it wasn't there. So after the meeting, I went to him and I said, Al, I'm not afraid anymore. Now I thought based on what I had seen on some other events in people's lives, there ought to be a party, a parade. What about a framed, signed notice from the General Service Office? No. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Good. Now go tell your sponsor, Pat, that you're ready for the second step." Isn't that just like y'all? Pushing me toward the solution. Don't let me stand still. That process that unfolded for me in the first step is the grace of God. Let's talk about my second step experience. My sponsor gave me a tape by Sandy Beach, God rest his soul. And I lived on that tape, listened to that every day. Sandy's experience was he was reading the steps one time and he saw the word God in big letters. That wasn't my experience. I read the second step and I saw the word could in big letters. Well, my sponsor was at work, so I went upstairs. I can't even say her name. I went upstairs to Jane Andrew's apartment. She was my personal mentor. She appointed my men sponsors, but Jane was always there for me. Jane saved my life. I said, "Jane, this thing came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity?" And she went, "Mm-hmm." I said, "Well, it doesn't say it would." And she said, "Oh, you know what you need? You need to read the ABCs of Alcoholics Anonymous." I said, "Okay, I will. Where is it?" She said, "I don't know. You better find out." I walked out of that woman's apartment, and I think she called everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous in the world and said, "Don't tell him. Don't tell him." My sponsor got out of work. I called him up. I said, "Pat, Jane wants me to read the ABCs of AA." And he goes, "Yep." I said, "Where is it?" And he said, "You better find out." I talked to Ginny. I talked to Phil. "You better find out." After about a week, my sponsor called me and he said, "John, let me just ask you something. What do you do while we're reading How It Works?" Well, I knew what to do. I knew how to give him what he wanted to hear, right? I said, "I'm listening." He said, "No, you're not. You're fidgeting with your cigarettes. You're flipping your lighter every time somebody walks in late. You turn around and see who it is." And I said, "Well, but I," and he said, "I want you to do this. I want you to sit still. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to listen when we read the preamble and How It Works." "Sure, I'll do that." Oh my God, the very first time I did that, I was going crazy because I knew y'all were looking at me. What's he doing with his eyes closed? I got my arms folded, I got my legs crossed, nothing's getting through. Over the course of time, I softened. I prayed about it, and then the day came. And I heard this for the very first. I've been listening to How It Works for months. I hear our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, help me out. That God could and would if he were sought. Never heard that before. That process, that tough love, that woman and that man and all you folks in Alcoholics Anonymous displayed to me once again the grace of God. This is going to be a tough one. My third step experience unfolded when Pat and I were out on the grounds of the university at Michigan State University. Beautiful, sunny Sunday afternoon. All the co-eds are walking by. We're kneeling on the grass outside the International Center. We have our big book in one hand, and we're holding hands with the other hand. I'm pretty embarrassed, but doggone it, I don't want to drink anymore. And if he says this is what we do, this is what I will do. And we recite the prayer out of the big book. I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Please take away my difficulties so that victory over them shall bear witness to those that I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We got up, went and had ice cream, took him home, and I went home. Didn't see any great burning bush. I did, however, feel like I have finally done something watchable, measurable in Alcoholics Anonymous. It kind of felt like I was a little bit more part of this deal. About 3 days later, Jane Andrews came home and knocked on my door. Come outside. Well, you don't question Jane Andrews. So we walked outside. We walked across the street. She turned and faced our apartment building, pretty typical, brownstone brick. 3 apartments on one side. She was in the middle. I was in what they call the garden level. My windowsills are even with the ground. 3 apartments on the other side. She said, look at the building. It's all different. No, Jane, I don't think so. John, look at it. It's been driving me crazy. For a week, I come home and I see the front of that building. The entire front of that building is different. What's different? Jane, it's a brick building. He didn't paint it. He didn't put shutters up. She said, John, honest to God, one thing changed, and it changed the face of that building. And I found out what it was today. I said, well, good. Would you tell me so I can go back inside? She put her arm around me, and she said with tears streaming down her cheeks, she said, your drapes are open. Your drapes have been closed for 4 years, John. That is what we mean when we talk about the sunlight of the Spirit. You're letting that in your life today. That is the grace of God. I stuck around for a year, quite an event. Jane rented the basement room in the Alano Club in Lansing. It was an old brick schoolhouse that had 5 classrooms and a boiler room. So we're next to the boiler room. There's 15, 18 people she's invited. There's cake and there's ice cream, and Johnny gets his 1-year token. She invited my brother, and he came and met these people. And on his way out, he said, stop by the house and see Mary, his wife, Michael, his son, because they want to congratulate you also. So on the way home, I did that. Mary let me in the side door. She said, Jim's in the back bedroom. He's on the phone with your sister Marilyn down in Illinois. So I went down the hall, said hello to my nephew, and I walked in. My brother's on the bed. He's on the phone. He's got his head in his hand. And I hear him say, Marilyn, I just left a group of people that I don't know from Adam. These people were able to help our brother John when we couldn't do it, and we're family. The priest at church couldn't do it, and he's a man of the cloth. The doctor couldn't get his attention. And yet these people in this basement of this dark, dank building were able to do for John what we could not do ourselves. To this day, I don't think he understands. I mean, it says in the doctor's opinion, to those who don't understand, civilians just don't get this deal. And you know why? Because they can think it all day, but they can't feel it the way we do. That is another example of the grace of God. Let's talk about Betty. Betty was a kindly old woman, started coming to the noon meetings at the Alano Club. Betty was hitting all 8 cylinders. She got women sponsors. She got a copy of the book. They got her into the program of action as outlined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and all of a sudden the head comes up and the eyes twinkle and the shoulders square. We all get to watch this, right? After about a month, here come the cookies. Betty's bringing in big trays of homemade. This is not Chip Ahoy and Oreo, right? This is scratch cookies. And Betty comes in, sets one here, sets one over here, and we're just, We got talking, a little informal group of us after a meeting. And the pattern is she's bringing cookies twice a week. Betty doesn't have a great deal of money. She can ill afford to do this. So we need to somehow let Betty know that she doesn't have to do this anymore. Apparently I drew the short straw, so I got to have the talk with her. My sponsor said, when you're going to go into an event like this, John, ask for help. You'll find the words. Be gentle. So I sat with Betty after a meeting, and I said, Betty, man, the cookies are so, I'm so glad you enjoy them, John. She says, you know, this is not some recipe out of Red Book or Women's Aid. These were my grandma's recipes. You know, little cardamom, little cinnamon, little nutmeg. And I said, well, you know, when we read the book and we read, I believe it's in Keys of the Kingdom, it says that we are wanted and we are needed and we are loved simply in exchange for a bottle and a hangover. Betty, we love you just the way you are. You don't need to make cookies anymore. Oh my God. Her head drops. And I'm praying like crazy in my mind. Help me find the words. Thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. We're talking cookies, McCune. I mean, come on. And I look, and the tears are streaming down Betty's cheeks. And all of a sudden, she looks up. I take her hand. I said, Betty, are you okay? And she says, well, we got a problem now. And the very first thing I think is, oh, she's into the vanilla extract, right? That's the first place my mind goes. But I said, well, what's the problem, Betty? And she says, my grandkids come twice a week, and they love my cookies. I said, Betty, everybody loves your cookies. And she says, but see, I'd make a batch of cookies, and I'd put them in the oven, and I'd have a couple drinks, and I'd forget about them, and they'd burn, and I'd have to throw them out. Okay? So I make another batch of cookies, and put them in the oven, I'd have a couple drinks, and I'd pass out, and the house would fill up with smoke, and I'd have to throw those out. Okay, Betty, what am I missing? She says, well, I converted my recipes so I can make like 6 or 8 batches at once, knowing that at least one of them had come out. Okay, is there a moral somewhere in our future here, Betty? She says, well, see, I come into AA and all y'all got me not drinking now, and all the cookies are coming out just fine, and I don't know what to do with all these doggone cookies. And then the light bulb went off over my head, and I went, oh, okay, I got it. So I went back to the group, and Ginny volunteered to spend an afternoon with Betty and get her recipe down to fighting weight. Of course, I'm the idiot for cutting the cookies off at the noon meetings. But on the surface of that, it's just a silly, funny little story about an old woman and her recipe. But do you see it? Right there underneath is the grace of God. Absolutely incredible. Let's talk about Mike. Mike was 2 years older than I was in high school. Mike was all-state halfback 3 years. Every college in Michigan wanted him. Mike was a straight A student. When I say George Stephanopoulos, do you get a picture in your mind? Little Greek, good-looking. That was Mike. Good-looking to a fault. He walked in the room, every woman's eye was on Mike. Now listen to this very carefully. I didn't want to be like Mike. I wanted to be Mike. This is a talent that I bring to all my interpersonal relationships, whereas I compare my inside to your outside, and I always lose. Even if I feel superior to the person that I'm comparing myself to, I lose, because the truth of the matter is, I'm not. I'm not any better than anybody else, and I'm not any worse than anybody else. I hear my sponsor in the back saying, God's in first place, rest of us tied for second. We're all just God's kids. I'm in a meeting one night, and guess who walks in? Mike. My very first thought was, oh my God, I don't want him to see me here. Totally forgetting that he's there for the same reason I am. After the meeting, Mike and I rekindle our acquaintance. We exchange phone numbers, as we're supposed to do. And by golly, a couple days later, Mike called me at work. Mac, he says, I need to borrow some money. Oh, well, my sponsor had trained me pretty well about that. He said, when someone in AA asks you to borrow money, tell them that you made a deal with your credit union. They don't sponsor people through the steps. You don't loan money. But I wanted Mike to like me. So I said, sure, how much do you need? He said, $50. Well, that was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money now. He said, I'll be right over to pick it up. Well, I said, I don't have it on me. And I heard my sponsor in the back of my mind again. If you've got to meet somebody and give them a book, or you owe them something, or they owe you, do it at a meeting. Let's get to one more meeting. You never know, but we're going to get them to one more meeting. So I said to Mike, I'll see you tonight at the Friday night Brotherhood Sisterhood group. He goes, I'll be there. I went, and he didn't. So I got up Saturday morning, rare as it was for a guy in retail grocery. I had the weekend off. So I went to the lake. I got $50 burning a hole in my pocket. I'm not going to go hunt him down, right? I'm not stupid. So I go to Lake Michigan for the weekend. And I know to leave the lake 2.5 hours before the 8 o'clock Sunday night meeting, because I'm going to go to the Sunday night 8 o'clock meeting. I walk in the club, and there it is on the chalkboard. Mike killed himself on Friday night. When he should have been at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, Mike took his own life. Ladies and gentlemen, in that instant, I got a little bit closer to being comfortable with being who I am. I got a little bit closer at being more comfortable in my own skin. This old guy, Heinz, this old German guy, used to say in meetings, come into a meeting, 30, 40 of us, write all of our problems down on a piece of paper, fold it up, put it in an envelope, seal it, write your name on it, throw it in the middle of the table. 1, 2, 3, go. Grab any envelope you want. You're going to grab your own envelope. I'm a little more familiar with my issues in life. I don't think it's safe for me to be anybody but John. That is the grace of God. Now, I have to confess to you that when I went through this part of the story to tell you today, I was conflicted, because I can attest to the grace of God in my life. But what about Mike? Where is the grace of God in someone who takes his own life? And so I took that to prayer, because I couldn't stand here and tell you all this story if I didn't resolve that. I believe it was Father Martin in one of his talks that said there comes a time or times in everyone's life, not just alcoholics, but in everyone's life, when no other person can fully understand what is going on in my heart. And it is in those times that I go to God, because that's the way He built me. That's the way we're all built. And I don't think that on that Friday night, I don't think Mike had the tools to take that pain to God. And knowing Mike, he wanted it face to face, and that's the only way he knew how to do it. I think Mike got comfort that night, and I think God is still holding him in the hollow of His hand. But I don't want to be Mike anymore. That is the grace of God. Let's talk about Jim. Jim was an AA guru. He had double-digit sobriety. I didn't care for Jim. I strongly disliked Jim. No, I hated Jim. The very mention of his name would make my blood boil. And what it says in this book is that's dangerous ground for me to be on. So I figured the only way to handle this was to burn his house down while he was in it. Because he could quote the book page and paragraph. Everybody was enamored with Jim. Jim paid just a little too much attention to my girlfriend, Karen. So I avoided Jim at all costs. I prayed about him, prayed for him, let him have all the freedom, happiness, peace, and serenity that I have. None of it worked, because I took a little too much pleasure in hating this man. So it's January, it's Saturday. Now we're in Michigan, right? We got 8 inches of snow on the ground. And Mary is going to be our speaker that night at the open talk. And everybody loves Mary. She got it going on. So the East Room, where the podium is packed. All on the floor behind my chair are all the guys from the halfway house. There's a row of chairs behind them. The place, we're like sardines. They got a speaker wire running across the hall to the West Room. That room is packed. And it's 7:45 and no Mary. Jim's sitting right across the room from me. No big deal. I can deal with that. It's 7:55. Janet pops her head in the door and she says, Mary's stuck in her driveway. She can't make it. Anybody want to talk? Yeah. Who stands up? Jim. And I'm pushing my chair back. I got Dortha on my left, and I've got Jane Andrews on my right, and they both take my hands and they say, sit down. the guys behind me, they're not going anywhere. I can't get out. I'm in my winter coat. It's 80 degrees in the room. We're all smoking, drinking coffee, and my blood is boiling. I can't do this. Jane said, sit down, sit still. So we get through the preamble and how it works. And Jim stands up, and I swear to God, I have never been this hot in my life. I am exploding inside. And Jim says, if you don't hear anything else that I say tonight, hear this. The bottom line of the 12 steps is the bottom line of the 12th step. To practice these principles in all of our affairs. Immediately, this cool feeling went from my head right down to my toes. And it was like my emotions sighed so heavy. My body physically trembled, and I began to cry. And I couldn't stop. In that moment, that resentment was lifted out of me, and I have had that experience maybe 6 or 8 times in the years that I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. The most absolutely incredible sensation. And even Jane commented after the meeting, what in the hell happened to you? And I told her. And she said, that's the grace of God. Now, I didn't want to go have coffee with Jim. I didn't want to break bread with Jim. But I didn't want to kill him anymore either. And I knew in my heart that if that man called me at 2 o'clock in the morning and needed my help, I'd get out of bed and I'd go help him. Because that's the way I was raised. Let's talk about the pre-programmed alcoholic that comes into the rooms of AA. And this is my experience only. Worry, anger, self-pity, depression. Worry, anger, self-pity, depression. Worry, anger, self-pity, depression. My big one, my favorite one, was self-pity. Oh, I loved self-pity. And I walked into the coffee shop one time, and Janet was behind the counter. I'm 15 feet from this woman, and she goes, oh my God, what is it now? Just by the way I walked. Well, the issue du jour was that the stylus on my turntable had broken. They were $14.99. I didn't have the money, and how was I going to get by without my music? And she looked at me, and she said, John, when are you going to realize that the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to you has already happened? You need to get your head back on your shoulders. You need to understand that you will never again, as long as you do what we tell you to do, you will never again know the agony of active alcoholism. That was the grace of God. That woman carried a message to me. I lived in that for a lot of years. And then I had children. I'm not so sure that the worst thing that could ever happen to me in my life has already happened. If something were to happen to one of my children. I know this much. There are people in this room that have had a child predecease them. I've been in meetings across the country with people who have had children predecease them. They never picked up a drink, ever. There's that worry, anger, self-pity, depression needs to be replaced and is naturally replaced through the process of the discipline of the spirituality of the steps. And what I come out with is freedom, happiness, peace, and serenity. Even in the midst of a horrible loss like that, I am granted freedom, happiness, peace, and serenity. This kind of ties in with an experience I had with, I was on a storytelling circuit back in the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago. And believe me, I won about 5 competitions. I was very good at it. And this was not AA stuff. This was you go to the bar, you throw your name in the hat, you get up on stage, and you tell a story based on a theme. I was in Chicago one night, and the waitress came around. I loved the reading this morning in Daily Reflections that we used in this morning's meeting. It was called Vigilance. My sponsor would say, no, John, it's constant vigilance. I'm in bars. I'm 300 miles from home. The waitress comes, what do you have? Jack and Coke, Sea Breeze, Jim Beam and water. She gets to me and I order the same thing every time. Cranberry juice, slice of lime, 3 straws. She goes, oh, you're the 3-straw dude. She goes and gets the rest of the wait staff. They come over and I tell the story. Why do I have 3 straws and a slice of lime in my drink? Because I ain't gonna get my drink mixed up with his Jack and Coke. Constant vigilance. Sometime later, I get a message on Facebook. His name is Kevin. It says, there's one thing I wanted to tell you about because believe it or not, you played a small, parenthetical aside, or maybe not so small, part in it. I've been sober for 17 months. I don't know if you remember, but I sat with you one night at Martyrs when we both went up to tell a story at the Slam. Your story on stage was great, but it was the story you told at the table that I could not let go of. Why you always have 3 straws in your non-alcoholic drink. You said something about AA that night that stuck with me. You said we're like a band of wild horses. And when one of us is injured, the rest of the horses close in around them and they carry them. And that's what happened with my divorce. You guys carried me for a year. This is what would happen if something were to happen to one of my children. I would just say, this is, and you would just close in around and carry me. Anyway, as soon as you said that, I knew it was something I wanted. As many friends as I had then, I was still very much alone and isolated in a drinking problem that I was ashamed to tell anyone about. That changed in July of 2012 when I wandered into my, I love that, my first AA meeting, a physical and emotional wreck, looking for that pack to join so I could get some help. A couple of weeks and a handful of meetings later, I had my last 2 bottles of wine on my couch. I got a sponsor, and I started a new adventure. I'm still very new in the program, but already so many things have changed for the better in my life. I just wanted you to know. You probably never imagined that you were helping someone that night. I certainly wasn't ready to reach out myself, but what you said struck a chord with me and remained with me. I now know it was one of the many things that my higher power sent to nudge me, little by little, to finally getting the help I needed. That is the grace of God. And how wonderful it is that we get to see this in action all the time. Now, we've all heard the statistics, and don't get me started on statistics, because you know what? We can make them out to whatever we want. I've heard numbers anywhere from 22 to 47. Let's pick 30. Every single person in this room represents an indeterminate number of people who need to be here, but aren't. So let's say it's 30. So there's 30 people that should stand in my stead in this room today, and they're not here. Now, I understand that some of them are probably cannots, as it says in How It Works. I fear the vast majority of them are just simply will nots. My sponsor will suggest something to me and I will hedge, and he'll say, "Oh, you're a will not." Oh, shut up. I'm not a will not. Well, then do what I'm telling you to do. What we do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is an immense thing. It is an immense thing. We get to say what we feel. In whatever our shortcomings are with the steps, whatever the shortfalls are with the steps in my past or in my future for that matter. Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where we can stand together and where no one gets left behind. No one gets left behind. Thank you.